welcome to Tea and Strumpets, a Regency romance review. I'm Zoe.
And I'm Kelsey.
And Kelsey, recently, the Emma movie has come out. Have you had a chance to see it yet?
I have not, because I'm notoriously bad about going to the movies.
Me too.
However, I think it looks really cute, and the cast looks fantastic. Like, I've watched the different trailers a bunch of times, and it does look very good, despite the fact that I do not have actual fond memories of Emma, the book.
Yeah, I think maybe we did talk about that in our episode with Evie Dunmore. You might have mentioned you had to read it for school and skipped some sections.
Yeah, didn't read it all the way through. Tried, but like, I would read it in class and then read it and then get into it and read ahead. And then when I was supposed to do like my homework reading, I would look at it and be like, nope, can't read this.
Well, I have never picked up Emma, as we have talked about probably too many times how neither of us has ever finished an Austen book.
Yeah.
But one thing that I heard about this Emma adaptation is basically they took... Maybe, I don't know, I just heard this, so I don't know if it's true, but someone said, like, they took Clueless and adapted it back to Emma because Clueless is an Emma adaptation.
Oh, interesting. So they like, did an adaptation of the adaptation?
I think that's what people were getting at, which is basically, like, they took all the fun of Clueless and put it back in history. So that also really, excites me.
That makes sense. And maybe it's just someone who has good memories of Clueless and they're like, oh, it's so very Clueless, knowing that Clueless is based off Emma. But that was the whole point of Emma. Like, Emma is supposed to be a funny romance about this matchmaker girl who keeps matching up the wrong people. Like, it's meant to be funny. That's, I think, why it looks so interesting and why I'm so excited about it, going to see it, is because it does look fun. And that's what Emma is supposed to be. Emma is supposed to be fun. This girl's supposed to match and then be like, no, you're not supposed to match with me. You're supposed to match with her. Why would I match with her?
I am really bad about movies. I mean, I see like 0 movies, but I really want to see it too. I think like it looks so visually interesting. And obviously I love romance. I love period pieces. So like,
I love period
right
pieces.
Up my alley. And
costumes
like you said,
look fabulous.
Oh my gosh, right? So it might be one that I actually get to, or I will watch it on Amazon.
I was like, or we will rent it when it comes out.
Exactly. So kind of inspired by the book that we are talking about today, I have a question for you. And it's loosely inspired. I'll get into how it's inspired later.
Lay it on me.
And that question is, what is your favorite classic book that you've read?
That one's a pretty straightforward for me. The Great Gatsby. I love The Great Gatsby.
Very cool. I have a confession to make. I have read very few classics because for whatever reason, whether it was switching schools, although I didn't switch high schools, but my classes just read so few books that other people like were required to read. Like my husband has read so many more classics than I have. So the only books that I can remember reading like throughout high school are, this is a sad list, Romeo and Juliet.
Fair.
Beowulf.
And read parts of it.
Dante's Inferno. I definitely read the Spark Notes.
I tried to read Dante's Inferno just on my own. Like my grandfather had like a classic copy of it and I just liked picking up an old book. So like I tried to read it and I got like some part into it, but never finished it.
Also, John Steinbeck's The Pearl. Those are the only books that I remember reading in high school, which I'm sure we also read The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which was cool.
That's a good book, but
it was cool.
Okay.
I mean, it's okay.
Arguments about classic. When I think classic, I think it has to be at least
Moby
written
Dick,
before
right?
1950.
It has to be like a Moby Dick. So that's where I'm like, well, can I call Lord of the Rings a classic?
I would say so.
So I would call that my definite favorite if I had to pick a classic. I feel bad. Oh, we might have also read the Canterbury Tales. I think we read that. But I just so don't remember them. I was so into fantasy at that time that I was reading so many different fantasy science fiction books on my own. And those are the things I remember. And of course, Lord of the Rings was one that my dad read to me when I was a little kid. So I have very fond memories and absolutely love that series.
Well, that's awesome.
So as I said, that was sort of inspired by the book that we read today because we read what I think most people would consider a classic author from this genre. She kind of was a big a really, really big force in the genre, and she wrote over 60 best-selling novels. And today we are talking about Tender Rebel by Johanna Lindsey. And as many of you may know, Johanna Lindsey passed away last year. And the reason that we wanted to read one of her books this week is because it is her birthday. And what better way to celebrate her birthday than to celebrate it with one of her works? So we do have some author facts this week.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, many of them. So I'm going to read you a couple of things here. So the first is just her general biography. So Johanna Lindsey was world-renowned for her mastery of historical romance, with more than 60 million copies of her novels sold.
Dang.
Right?
That's a lot of novels.
She was the author of nearly 60 nationally best-selling novels, many of which reached the #1 spot on the New York Times bestseller list. And I think by many, they mean like around 40 or 50. I mean, like, it's insane.
A good over 50% average.
Yes. And Lindsey wrote her first book, Captive Bride, in 1977 on a whim.
That's a whim to go for.
I know. And the book was a success, as were all the others that followed. Lindsey lived in New Hampshire with her family and passed away last year from lung cancer. And I was thinking, you know, when someone passes away, it's very, especially a prominent figure, usually there is an obituary in the New York Times. So that would be like a normal thing to go and read. However, her obituary left a lot to be desired. I think as fans of romance, it was okay, but it kind of missed the mark. And Jennifer Prokop, who is one of the hosts of Fated Mates and also writes for Kirkus Reviews, wrote something much better than that. And she just put it into words so well that I'm going to read you an excerpt from her article. And I am paraphrasing a little bit. We've cut it down. And so we're going to link to it in the show notes so you guys can read the whole thing because it's really quite brilliant. And it is titled, The Memorial Johanna Lindsey Deserves. And she writes, as we have seen time and time again, obituaries of famous women are a problem. No matter what her actual accomplishments, a woman's obituary often highlights the story of her personal life while downplaying her work. Let's pause to talk about How to Suppress Women's Writing, a book written in 1983 by science fiction author Joanna Russ. When writing obituaries of female writers, the New York Times is not shy about using two particular moves with almost balletic precision described by Russ. Russ identifies, quote, bad faith as the simple act of valuing women's work less than men's work. As for romance writers, the New York Times obituary for Johanna Lindsey dismissively labels her books as, quote, bodice rippers. That language is downright kind compared to the 2015 obituary for Beatrice Small, which begins by describing her as a, quote, convent-educated writer whose dozens of bodice-ripping romance novels titillated readers for decades, and then anoints her a, quote, virtuoso in navigating the fine line between passionate romance and sophisticated smut. In case you missed the implicit assertion that the writing is worthless and silly, the New York Times takes an extra step of reducing the work of a romance writer to a set of salacious facts. This woman wrote about sex. This woman wrote about rape. This woman wrote about sin. This woman is not a good girl. The New York Times obituaries of Lindsey Small and Kathleen Woodwiss also quote florid passages from their novels. Many obituaries of romance writers gleefully embrace the idea that writing about sex, a thing most people do, renders the author immoral, but writing about murder, a thing most people never do, earns the author no judgment at all. Even more depressing is the way the obituaries for Woodwiss, Small, and Lindsey blame and dismiss them for writing about women who were raped. As a comparison, it is again instructive to look at the obituary of the man who arguably wrote the most famous rape scene in all of literature, Vladimir Nabokov. When Nabokov died in 1977, the New York Times obituary explained Lolita as a, quote, narrative, an exercise in logododali, as a search for meaning and truth, as a tantalizing flight of imagination, as an exploration of a dreamlike confusion of time and place, and as an elaborative spoof. So more than 40 years later, the New York Times obituary described the hallmarks of Lindsey's writing as, quote, stories built around romantic and sexual surrender between arrogant, willful men and heroines with little power from centuries past, descended at times into rape. In literature, rape is about showing how little power women have, while in romance, rape is often about showing women's strength. When men write about rape, it is, quote, search for meaning and truth, while in romance, it's a story about healing and recovery. In literature, rape is often the end of a woman's story, while in romance, it's a moment that must be born. Your life is still yours. You still have a future. You still matter. You still are you. The way we mourn the people we've lost matters. These obituaries function as a signal from mainstream culture that romance's work and the work of these women is without value. Eventually, the obituaries of Lindsey and discussions of her work that were more comprehensive began to appear, but that too will likely be hidden from public view. The world will go on shaming the genre for exploring love and sex, but readers know the truth, that this work is important and valuable, and romance authors deserve to be remembered with dignity.
That is really passionate. Sorry, I'm like really, it's just so much food for thought. But also just it's such a...
It's so true.
It is.
And it, like, when you read that, you go, she deserves better. And we deserve better. Because, again, this is the thing that happens over and over again, where you have to defend romance. And that's what we're here to do. We're absolutely here to do it, and we're going to keep doing it. But it is frustrating, and it is exhausting, and it just feels like someone who's so accomplished as Johanna Lindsey shouldn't be remembered in that way.
No.
And that is...
and it's really diminishing, like, the achievements she did, because it's trying to boil her down to one thing, which is not a positive. Instead of portraying her as the complex person she was and the characters that she portrayed and the lasting impact she had on many women and probably men as well.
Yeah, and Jennifer just put it so perfectly. And again, I took out some of her writing just because I couldn't read the whole thing. It would have been like 15 minutes long, it felt like. So gosh, but she just said everything that we wanted to say in such beautiful terms. And so thank you so much for writing that. And go listen to Fated Mates if you guys don't already, to hear more of her infinite wisdom, it seems. So, of course, we will link to that in the show notes. But let's get into the book that we're talking about today.
Yes. So today our main tropes are afraid to fall in love, needs to marry quickly, the reformed rake, and, of course, my favorite, misunderstandings.
Dun, dun, dun. All right. And our main characters are Lady Roslynn Chadwick and Sir Anthony Malory, although sometimes he's called Lord Anthony Malory. I was a little confused on the titles in this one. I don't know if it's just that. I have no idea, because I don't really know how titles work in it. I just know what historical romance does.
That's true. I did look this up once, and I think like fourth sons of a Marquess, like, don't necessarily have a title, but maybe the Sir is like an honorary title. Like he maybe has like an honorary baronet, you know? I don't know.
I don't know either, but he was called both in this one, so good for him.
Yeah, there you go. He's getting things done.
All right, so shall we begin?
We shall. Lady Roslynn Chadwick is on the run. She and her maid, Nettie, have absconded from their home in Scotland secretly and are headed to London to find Roslyn a husband. The reason for her escape? A nefarious cousin by the name of Gordy, who is most upset that her grandfather and his great-uncle left the entire family fortune and empire to her. Gordy's solution is to marry Roslyn, but she not only finds him repulsive, but also worries that he would do her harm if they married, as the family rumor is that he had something to do with her mother's death when they were children. So there's a lot of family history going on here. Suffice to say, doesn't want to marry her cousin, which is fine. You don't need to marry the dude, girl. So the best and only way to deter him is to marry someone else, and she's promised her grandfather that she would do so as quickly as possible once he passed. And so far, their journey out of Scotland has been a success. They haven't been followed, so the pair finally breathe a sigh of relief when they cross the border.
And then we meet our hero, Sir Anthony Malory, at a boxing club. He's a beast, and no one really wants to fight him because he simply wallops them all. Lucky for him that on this day, a familiar face waltzes in and accepts the challenge. It's his brother, James, who has been gone nearly 10 years, though it seems that perhaps in book one, they'd already reconnected. I'm pretty sure that's what happened there.
Yes. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah, definitely. And although he was set to sail that morning, he's decided to stay in London a little bit longer. His son, Jeremy, has enjoyed meeting the family and wishes to stay. In fact, would Anthony mind keeping him when James finally does sail? Anthony doesn't really want to, especially as Jeremy looks too much like Anthony rather than James.
Awkward.
And so, of course, yeah, right? And so, of course, the two have a rousing boxing match, and Anthony finally agrees. Because, after all, family is family, and the Malorys are very loyal.
When Roslynn arrives in London, she goes to meet her one friend, Lady Frances, who she had met at finishing school on the year that she attended. The ladies had maintained a friendship through letters and a few visits throughout the years. Lady Frances is very upset that Roz wants to marry. Her own marriage had been disastrous after the man she had loved had rejected her, and in a difficult way, she had married the next man she could find. And now Roz is an extremely wealthy, independent woman. Why would she throw this away? Roslynn insists that she promised her grandfather she would, and she sticks by her word.
However, Roz is worried, though, that she's a bit too old to find a husband because she's 25.
Oh, no. How dare. How can this old spinster find a husband?
It'll never happen. It just can't. Plus, she doesn't want a young buck because they just won't suit. And her grandfather told her that reformed rakes make the best husbands because, after all, he was one himself. But she just can't stomach the idea because Frances had had her heart broken by a rake, and Roz just can't do that to herself. She'd rather have a marriage based on mutual respect for each other with the possibility to grow fondness or even love one day. But no rakes, because that would lead to heartbreak.
Finally, though, Roz does tell Frances about Gordy and the rumors that he had a hand in her mother's demise. Frances immediately understands the gravity of the situation and the security a husband would provide Roz. So she changes her tune and becomes a strong ally in the husband hunt.
Meanwhile, the Malory men have a small issue. Anthony's niece, and the subject of Book 1, whose name is Regina, or Reggie, or Regan, depending on who's talking to her, needs an escort to a ball because her husband isn't available. Anthony usually isn't seen at balls because he causes a stir with his rakish charm and devastating looks, but Jeremy wants to and could escort her. But they decide that Jeremy is just another young buck himself and needs supervision, so Anthony will come, but he will keep to the shadows and intervene only if necessary.
Roslynn, of course, has taken the ton by storm. Her fiery hair and stunning beauty have attracted oh so many suitors at all the affairs they've attended. Frankly, it's exhausting. And there have been so many boys who've taken her time. She really needs to focus on finding the older, suitable gentleman for her. Quote, what she was in need of at this point was a confidant and advisor who knew these men and could help her whittle down her list.
But as she's thinking this, a particularly determined suitor, who she was not interested in, was heading her way again, and Roz finds that she simply must escape for a respite. So she dashes off into the crowd and out onto the terrace, which is blessedly empty. She watches as the man realizes she has disappeared and gives up. And so she's elated and relaxes and looks out into the garden. And oh, look over there, a bench that's obscured under a willow. What a lovely place for a moment alone to gather herself.
As she runs towards the bench, Roslynn sadly realizes that the bench is occupied. Sitting on the back with his feet on the bench seat is Anthony Malory. He had seen this red-haired wonder through the windows and had wondered if her features would be as beautiful as her bearing. And then she had come running towards him. Well, of course he knew that she couldn't have known he was there, but his heart had still leapt at her approach.
Before Roz can announce her indignation at his presence in her haven, a light switches on upstairs and illuminates his face. And Roz is unprepared because he is simply the most beautiful man she has ever laid eyes on. Quote, it was her weakness from lack of air that jolted Roslynn back to her senses. She breathed in deeply and slowly and exhaled on a sigh. It simply wasn't fair. Gramp had warned her. She didn't have to be told. She knew. He was one of them, one of the not to be considered. He was too ruthlessly handsome not to be.
However, Anthony is taken with Roz, and he knows that he must have her. Plus, seeing her up close, he realizes that she's not a debutante, which means they can certainly have a tryst. After all, she's an experienced lady. At least she looks it. So he opens up the conversation with, who guards you? But Roz is no dummy. And they banter for a minute, and then she shows her hand. Quote, "Still she had to ask. She couldn't help herself. Would you marry me then?" Marry? She had managed to discompose him. She almost laughed at his look of horror. "I don't mince words, sir, though I'm not usually that forward. But considering what you said to me, my question was perfectly in order. So may I assume that you are not husband material?" "Good God, no." "You needn't be that emphatic," she said, disappointment just barely discernible in her tone. "I didn't think you were."
And while they chat a bit more, eventually Roz realizes that her absence can't be for much longer, and she excuses herself from Tony awkwardly, slipping back into her Scottish brogue, saying, "Sorry, guys, I'm going to try." There is Scottish brogue in this one, and sometimes for the quotes we'll need to do it, but we have no Scottish accent.
Nope, none to speak of.
It's a husband I'm needing, not a love, and you dinna qualify. More's the pity.
And while she startled Anthony with her brogue and confession, he's only more determined to have her on his terms. Quote, "A slow smile started and widened. More's the pity," she had said with such poignant regret. The little miss didn't know it, but she had sealed her own fate with those words.
Soon after Roz returns to the ballroom, Anthony makes an appearance inside to check on Jeremy and causes his normal stir. The rumors fly about Jeremy being another Malory bastard, and of course he looks just like Anthony, so there's that started. Roz is listening to all the gossip with a rapt ear when Frances finds her to introduce her to Lady Eden, who does know the ton like the back of her hand, and is quickly enlisted to help Roslynn find a suitable suitor. However, Lady Eden can't help but comment on Anthony's excellent looks and the way that he's staring openly at Roz. When Lady Eden calls Anthony Tony, which he has told Roz that his intimates call him, a bit of jealousy and curiosity bubbles up inside Roz, and Lady Eden admits she does know the family very well.
The next day during a ride in Hyde Park, Tony learns from Regina that Lady Roslynn is very good friends with Lady Frances. This does not bode well for Tony because he now understands her aversion to rakes. His good friend George had made a mistake with Lady Frances, and, well, now it all makes sense. His chances were slimming with her. The riding party, of course, runs into Lady Roslynn herself, and she is introduced to James, Tony's brother, who looks nothing like Tony. He's blonde and big everywhere, where Tony is dark and sleek. And of course, James is also interested immediately. But then his son Jeremy comes up, and James introduces him as his son. But Roz already is suspicious, as he looks nothing like James, and all like Tony. Ugh. Oh, just assumptions.
Oh, I know, right? But Roz is escorting Frances's younger son, Timmy, who, it should be noted, looks everything like George Amherst and nothing like his father. So soon the parties part. However, especially with his brother's interest, Tony now finds himself a bit jealous and ever more convinced that he must have Rosalind.
The next day while shopping, a terrifying incident occurs. Roz has the feeling like she's being watched, and when on her way to the carriage, a man grabs her and tries to kidnap her. Luckily, she has a dirk in her boot and manages to use it to deflect her foe. But she and her maid are quite shaken. Could Gordy have found them so soon, or was it simply chance? Either way, this influences Roz's decision to accept an invitation from Lady Eden to a house party outside of London. Perhaps it would be good to get out of the city for a couple days.
The added benefit of heading to Lady Eden's party was the increased likelihood that she wouldn't see Anthony Malory and be distracted by him. However, she is extremely mistaken, for this party is the one party that the Malorys tended to attend, for Lady Eden is none other than Anthony's niece, Regina. And while many of Roz's top contenders are also at the party, so is Anthony.
But there is a new country gentleman that Regina thinks would be an exceptional option for her as well. His name is Lord Justin, and he is handsome, young-ish, and delightful. He rarely comes to London, but he isn't adverse to a wife. Roz can't help but agree with Regina's assessment, and Lord Justin is put on the list.
However, Anthony is not going to make things easy for Rosalind, and he tries to steer her out of the parlor. Quote, "You're not going to turn coward on me, are you?" His voice sounded near her ear. Rosalind bristled that he should make it a challenge. "I simply don't want to leave the room with you." "But you will." She stopped walking, forcing him to either drag her behind him or stop as well. He stopped, and the tiniest hint of a grin appeared as he bent his head to hers. "Let me put it this way, sweetheart. Either I kiss you in the conservatory or I kiss you right here, right now. Whichever way, I am going to take you in my arms and— The devil you are, Roslynn got out before she noticed how many people were suddenly watching them. Very well, she amended in a quiet hiss. I would like to see the conservatory, but there will be no kissing, you scoundrel, and I'll have your promise first. His grin was wide and bold now. Come along, then.
I know. As they wander, Roz shouts that she really should take him to task, and was it really so necessary for him to be so high-handed? But he won't concede and says that yes, it was, because ever since he's laid eyes on her, all he's been thinking about was—
Yeah, so they kiss. Roslynn can't protest as he draws her in, and it's pretty explosive. And Anthony realizes that he's chosen his location quite poorly because he did not expect Roslynn to capitulate so easily, and they can't go further here in this conservatory. So he tells her to go to her room now, and he'll meet her there. But this is enough to shake Roslynn from her fever. Why would she go to her room?
Anthony is surprised. Is Roslynn really innocent at her age? But he tells her that they're going to make love. It's the natural progression of what they've been doing.
And Roslynn is shaken fully out of her lust at this. Of course they aren't. They shouldn't have been kissing in the first place. Then Anthony tries some really high-handed, shitty stuff with— Now be a good girl and do as I say, or I'll take you right here. I swear I will. And the devil take anyone who happens upon us.
Ugh. Luckily, Roz doesn't frighten easily and says, You cannot use that bluff on me twice, laddie.
So he tells her to leave the door unlocked tonight. She laughs and says it won't be, and they squabble some more until they are interrupted by James Malory, who is here to inform them that Lady Frances is looking for Roz.
Luckily, Justin Wharton was so delighted that he made it easy for Roz to forget her time in the conservatory. Frances tells her off for being alone with Anthony, and Roz promises it won't happen again. She has to get married, and he's not an option.
Later that evening, James Malory surprises Roz with a kiss, and she is absolutely livid at his cavalier treatment of her. She tells him off, and he asks if she is certain she prefers his brother. Her reply is, quote, I never said I preferred your brother, but that doesn't mean I prefer you to him either. The fact is, Lord Malory, I don't want either of you. Now will you let me pass, or must I throw caution to the winds and call for help?
Jesus, these brothers. Okay. The next morning, Roz has overslept. She had meant to join the hunt with Lord Justin and impress him with her equestrian skills, but thinking about Anthony had kept her tossing and turning for hours, so she dresses and hopes to meet the party at the lunch picnic. Anthony, however, is waiting outside her rooms, and he says he's just here to talk, nothing more. In fact, quote, if you can't bring yourself to trust me, how am I going to help you? And he offers to be her confidant and help her choose her husband, for the sooner she's unhappily married, the sooner they can have their affair.
Roz finds this despicable, of course, but then Anthony offers up some information about her candidates that is truly helpful. He actually knows these men better than the ladies of her acquaintance, and so she begrudgingly accepts his help with the caveat that he has only 1 week to get the facts to her.
Later that week, after she's returned to London, Roz awakens, but dearly hopes it's a nightmare. She's in an unfamiliar room with peeling paper, a chipped water basin, and a cockroach as her only companion. But deep down, she knows somehow Gordy has found and kidnapped her.
And she's right. He enters and does a typical sort of villain speech, letting her know she's guarded and the vicar is on his way. The kind of vicar who doesn't need to hear her say, I do. Plus, he tells her how he was able to kidnap her, as a good villain does, through a bait and switch with a servant and a few helpers along the way. He also admits he had been behind her first attempted kidnapping and had lost her when she went to the house party. And when he leaves her, she knows she has to try to escape.
However, she's on the second floor of this inn or house or whatever it is, and it's overlooking an alley. No one looks up when she waves her arms, and frantically she decides to jump into a hay wagon when it rolls under her. Miraculously, she makes it onto the wagon unharmed and doesn't even disturb the driver, which is weird.
I think he smelled very strongly of gin or something.
Let's hope so, because that should have been a big jolt.
I mean, it was a cobblestoned alley, so it would have still been a big jolt, but I'll give her that.
Yeah. Once he reaches the stable, she makes herself known and barters the only thing she has, her mother's cross, for a cloak, as she's in her nightdress, and a horse, and she makes her way back to Francis's.
So she rushes inside to find Nettie and insists that they quickly change her and pack to leave. They can't waste any time. She will ride her horse to Lady Eden's for the time being and make her choice of husband from there. Nettie should go a different way, but meet her there eventually. And so they part with that plan. But first, Roz has one stop she must make.
Anthony's butler doesn't know what to make of the lady who's in the hall. Neither does Anthony. Women don't visit him like this. But wait, did you say she was Scottish? Send her up.
So Roz is shown up to Anthony's bedroom as he was readying for dinner, and she is in a huff. She needs to know now who she should marry because she has run out of time. And Anthony knows something has happened, and he demands to know what. And Roz finally does tell him about Gordy in the past and the present of her kidnapping. And suddenly, Anthony knows that none of her suitors are suitable. He tells her what he knows of them, with some embellishments and one completely untruth, and she is distraught. Has he really left her no one? She supposes she'll go back to Scotland and marry a crofter.
But of course, Anthony can't stand for this. Quote, "Confound you, woman. I'm not about to let you throw yourself away on some dirt farmer. You'll marry me." Roz, of course, doesn't believe him. She chuckles and moves to leave, but he asks her again if she will marry him. And she's incredulous. He didn't mean it. But now Anthony is sure. He has never wanted a woman the way he wants Roz. And if this is what he has to do to have her, he's willing to do so. He pleads with her that she shouldn't compare him to Francis's failed love, George Amherst, for George realized what a mistake he had made and would marry her today if she'd let him.
Rosalind still cries off, and Anthony tries other tactics. She'd be ruined if it was known she was here. Plus, he's a rake, and as a rake, he must take advantage of the fact that she's in his bedroom.
And finally, Roz decides that she wants this man. She wants to have sex with this man. She doesn't believe his proposal is serious, but why shouldn't she let herself have one night? Anthony, on the other hand, is sure they will marry. But either way, they give in to their desires and have encounter number one. Quote, "He was a man victorious, rejoicing. And she didn't care. She was smiling herself, but inwardly, because if he had one, so had she, defeating her own common sense to have what she had wanted all along, to make love with this man, to have him initiate her and be her first lover, because with him, she knew it would be beautiful."
And in the morning, Anthony awakens Roz with a cheerful grin, telling her that, quote, "The sun has decided to shine for our wedding." But Roz still isn't sure about marrying. But Anthony is insistent that she has been compromised, so they must. Plus, he's gone about getting a special license, so they can do so today. And so Roz assumes he wants her fortune, as he's a fourth son. But in actuality, he's quite rich. She just doesn't know this yet. So she asks, quote, "So what will you get out of this marriage then?" Anthony answers simply, "You," he says.
So he sends her onward to Regina's house and lets her know that he will be following so they can marry this afternoon. Once he arrives and they explain this to the family, Roz finally agrees, with one stipulation: he must keep a mistress. She knows this isn't a love match, and if he does that, then she can remain detached. Anthony is furious, but agrees so they can marry.
And they head back to London, where they have the excitement of a highwayman robbing them on the way back. And Anthony defeats him, and this isn't really important to the story. And then that night, they have encounter number 2.
However, marital bliss is not to be expected, because soon after, this is where the misunderstandings start. Yay! Over the first month of their marriage, the following frustrations occur. Anthony admits he isn't going to keep a mistress. Roz is live-in and feels he married her under false pretenses. However, he insists, quote, "My eyes have been a-wandering, as you put it, for the last 19 years. Give them a rest, Roslyn. They've settled on you and don't want to move on."
He also admits that he lied or embellished about her suitors because he was jealous and wanted her for himself.
She insists he only married her to get out of a horrid situation, which she's grateful for.
Roz tells Jeremy that she knows he is actually Anthony's son, to which he laughs in her face because he simply isn't. She really tries to insist she's fine with it, but finally does come around to realize that he isn't Anthony's son.
That was the dumbest thing ever. Anthony spends the entire day looking for Gording after the wedding night because while he took an advert out in all the papers, the sooner Gordy knows that Rosalind's married, the sooner she'll be safe. Adoxy sits on his lap and he pushes her into the willing arms of his brother James, but she gets her hair and perfume on Anthony.
Roz is furious when Anthony arrives home because she doesn't understand why he was gone all day and feared the worst, that he was at a brothel. But he admits he was tracking down her cousin, and she apologizes until he hugs her and she smells him and sees the hair on his shirt. And she flies into a rage and is not consolable. He tries very, 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 very hard to explain, but she absolutely will not listen to a word of it.
This causes her to kick him out of the house, and she moves out of his room. He insists that they finish the discussion, but she won't budge. They have an epic row where he tries to reason with her, and she simply won't listen at all.
Anthony continues to try to have conversations with Roz, and she continues to be stubborn and, frankly, stupid.
Anthony and James get really drunk one day and have to be taken home by George Amherst, and Roz is irritated, but this only firms her resolve.
Rosalind tries to get back at Anthony the only way she knows how. She redecorates his home exorbitantly using his money, thinking him not rich still.
Anthony continues the search for Gordy to no avail. Later that week, Roz icily inquires if he'll be home for dinner that evening as Lady Frances is joining her. He says he will be, and he is, but he brings George Amherst as his guest, and Roz is furious. However, while Roz is railing at Anthony, George and Frances talk, and they decide to marry. Roz is still hurt by the whole thing somehow and confused.
And later that week at their wedding celebration ball, Anthony is still trying to win Roz back. He asks her while dancing what a man can give to a woman who has everything. His heart, perhaps? And she just dismisses the idea, saying, quote, "If your heart's mine, then it's mine to do with as I choose, and I'd be choosing to cut it into wee pieces afore I give it back."
Then we have a brief interlude from their fighting because Gordy surfaces again. He has figured out where Roslyn is, and he has decided to shoot the man who is harboring her. While out for his morning ride, Anthony is shot out, but it misses him, although it throws him from his horse, so he's unable to pursue the shooter. Luckily, George Amherst is there, and he makes chase, so now they know where Gordy is.
As he is preparing to go meet Gordy, Roz walks in and discovers what has happened, and she is quite upset to find that Gordy has not quit and is trying to harm those dear to her, even if she won't admit that Anthony is dear. But before she can propose an alternative plan to buy Gordy off to Anthony, he's already gone. However, the fight with Gordy is anticlimactic. Gordy hadn't known they were married. He'd only thought that the man was hiding her. And Anthony pummels him so easily that Gordy easily agrees and says they will never see him again.
Roslyn, meanwhile, is making some big decisions. She really wants a child, so she's going to share Anthony's bed again. Her maid thinks she's being stupid about a few things, but she again insists that she is doing what's right for her. So when Anthony returns, still late with the fervor from his meeting with Gordy, he is pleased then dismayed to find Roz in his room. Because once he arrives, she tells him she's only going to share his bed until he gives her the child he's promised. And he grows cold and angry and throwing out words like breeding and stud, but he won't let her leave, and they have encounter number 3. It's angry sex. And Anthony sits her atop him and tells her, "You wanted to use my body. You have it. Now ride me."
And she does, kind of blissfully. But that night, before they go to sleep, she realizes what a terrible mistake she's made when Anthony icily tells her, "Go to sleep, Roslyn. We will breed again at my convenience, not yours." So the next morning, she feels terrible and feels guilt for all the money that she's spent. So she decides to pay the bills with her own money, plus transfer the money from her dowry to Anthony. So she gets up early to go to the bank. But after she leaves the bank, she is accosted again. And this time, the kidnapper is ready for her knife. They triumph and shove her into the coach and take her to Gordy.
Gordy, however, is packing, and when he sees the hired thugs deposit Roslyn in his kitchen, he is aghast. He had dropped his pursuit of her, and he's already so beaten, he didn't want Anthony to come back again. But like a good villain, he admits some more truths. He did not have anything to do with her mother's death, and he actually really wanted to marry her because he's in love with her.
Rosalind is actually sympathetic and offers him £10,000 to start his new life, and also buys off the thugs, and is eventually picked up by Anthony after she's diffused the entire situation because her coach driver had alerted him as to what had happened.
Back at home, Anthony and Roz have a discussion about the bills, and she comes to find out that he's actually filthy rich. And he tells her to put her dowry into a trust for their children. He doesn't want it. Plus, he will pay for anything in their house and any of her expenses because that's the responsibility of a husband.
His brother James is finally about to set sail, and he discovers from Anthony that the quarrel between him and Roz has been the barmaid all along. He ends up writing a letter and asking Jeremy to deliver it later discreetly. That same morning, Roslynn has realized that she cannot hold her secret in any longer. She must be pregnant because she keeps throwing up. She realizes that this means they must have conceived their first night together because it has only been a month since their marriage. So technically, she's at most 6 weeks, which I know is weird, but the truth is that in modern times, they measure pregnancy from the date of the last period. So most likely, Roz would have had her period 2 weeks before. I did this because I was like, really? She has morning sickness already? It seemed like way too early. But actually, morning sickness can occur at 6 weeks of pregnancy, even though the first 2 weeks of pregnancy are negative, in my opinion. Like, who calls, oh, you're not pregnant this? Anyhow, the point is, I just find this so weird. But the point is that, yeah, it could be possible for her to have morning sickness then.
Anthony tells her that the whole pregnancy thing is delightful to her, so the visits to his room are at an end. And they part angry again, because we're still fighting.
Oh, yeah. But Frances is blissfully happy, and at her wedding breakfast tries to tell Roz that all she has to do is admit she loves Anthony. But Roz simply can't because she knows that Anthony doesn't love her back. Frances asks, and this is so great, quote, "Have you given him anything to love?" Roslynn grimaced. "No, you might say I've been a royal bitch ever since we married." Hey, Roz, you said it.
Yeah, you said it, not us.
But then Roz decides that she does want to forgive Anthony and try again. And after they send James and the maiden Anne off, Roz finally gets a chance to have a word with Anthony. He joins her in her room and sits at her vanity while she tries to start.
She admits she was wrong to put limitations on their marriage, but Tony isn't really listening because he notices the note in his brother's hand on her vanity. How dare his brother interfere with their marriage? But Roslynn hasn't even seen it. And after conferring with Jeremy, they realize that's the truth. So Anthony calms down and listens to her apology. She apologizes for the limitations, she apologizes to coming to him only for a baby, and she admits she was afraid to let herself love him. So they kiss and make up, and she admits she loves him. And rather than say it back, he asks her to read the letter.
In it, James corroborates the story of the barmaid and says that Anthony did nothing wrong. And finally, somehow, Roz really believes it. And there is a tearful apology scene, and she feels really stupid. But they do exchange their love this time, and things are right and good in the world.
The end.
The end. And there is much to discuss with this one. So shall we adjourn to the parlor?
We shall. Today, we'd like to talk about Blush Magazine. If you all recall, Blush has changed hands and is now run by Jennifer and Alyssa of Lit Uncorked. And since they've taken over, Blush is no longer a subscription, but a completely free digital magazine. But as always, Blush takes readers beyond the pages of their favorite books to meet their favorite authors and focuses solely on the romance novel industry, interviewing authors, following trends, delving into tropes, and the many intricacies specific to the romance genre, and provides insightful, thought-provoking, and fun editorial content on a monthly basis.
So head on over to blush-magazine.com or bit.ly/blushmagazine to check out the latest issue. And we will link to that in the show notes. So today's book recommendation comes to us from listener Chris, who recommends The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue. And they say that it, quote, is a bit more young adult than romance, but in many ways it was their bridge to this genre. It's a romantic adventure novel that follows a lordling in love with his best friend as they go on the European Grand Tour. It's set in the 1700s, so wigs. The best friend is representation they've yet to come across in any other novel. He's mixed race and epileptic, and the book handles these things really responsibly. Genuinely an amazing read. Also, there's pirates. And doesn't that sound great? Also, that does sound great. Second recommendation that we've had for this book. We also got recommended this book on Twitter. So I am so intrigued.
Yeah, I'm super intrigued. And I love also there's pirates.
Right?
I'm down. Pirates.
And the wig warning, much appreciated. But hey.
We can just pretend they're not there.
Absolutely.
If you have a book recommendation, we'd love to hear from you. If you have an inclusive author you love, we want to hear about it and share it. Let us know through our email, romancepod@gmail.com.
And if you'd like to find us on social media, you can find us on Instagram at T as in Tom, N as in Nancy Strumpets, Twitter at TN Strumpets, Facebook / the same, Pinterest / the same, and by searching our name on YouTube.
We also have one last reminder that today, March 12th, is the last day to enter the giveaway for a signed copy of An Heiress to Remember. Visit bit.ly/heiress giveaway to enter, and we'll be sure to link that in the show notes. Also, it's open to U.S. residents only, but we'll be sure to do another giveaway soon.
And finally, if you enjoy what you've heard here today, we ask that you share it with a friend. Word of mouth is one of the best ways that podcasts can grow. So if you like what we're making, we would so appreciate anyone else you think might enjoy too to learn about us.
Okay, let's talk about this book. Let's do it.
Oh my gosh.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Let's do it.
Let's do it. Wow. Okay. So this was the first Johanna Lindsey that either you or I read.
Correct. So
I feel a little bit like maybe we didn't pick the best one to be the first one.
Well, and this book does have a publishing date of 1983?
No. I wasn't born in 83, Kelsey. I was born in 88.
Okay,
yeah,
sorry.
That's just teasing. No, and I'm not saying that this wasn't I'm not saying this book wasn't the best book. I'm just saying I wish we'd maybe chosen one of the favorites of Johanna Lindsey to be our introduction to Johanna Lindsey. Okay. I don't know what the opinion of this book is by the masses, but unfortunately, So the way we chose this book was that we were like, oh, the Malory-Anderson series is one of her biggest and best series, and a lot of people talk about it. It's got books that I've heard of like Gentle Rogue, which I do want to get to talking about later. But we looked at the first book of the series and both of us were we looked at the synopsis and we were both like, that's really not our jam. It's not the tropes that we like. So we chose, we went to the second book in the series because we didn't want to get into a 12-book series and be super lost at this also. Yeah. So we thought, okay, book 2, we should be fine. And it seemed like a good synopsis. Unfortunately, the misunderstandings trope is just one of our least favorites. You and I hate it. And I don't.
Oh, I hate it.
And so I feel a little bit bad about that. But I think there's still a lot to talk about with this book. So my general thoughts are that the first half of the book, Anthony Malory is kind of a dick. And the second half, he is wonderful. He's I want to communicate.
Agreed.
Right? He's I want to communicate. We need to talk. All this stuff. And
I will say about it, there was it was very much a switch.
Yes.
It was he was going, including derailing her efforts to find a suitor, literally to get her in bed. And then as soon as the marry me popped out of him, at first he was horrified. And then he was and then he doubled down. He's nope, that's what we should do.
Yeah.
And then he went into it full open heart, never proposed marriage, full open heart, and was I want to make my life with you work. And she gets married to him and she's fuck you.
Yeah. And then Roslynn, I think, did the same thing. Because in the beginning of the book,
in the first half,
such a badass. Anthony said all this shit. I know.
Second half, I'm just what are you doing? Oh my God.
And then when that line, so one thing I really liked about Johanna Lindsey, and she did this a bunch of times in the book, where there would be something where it would be oh, well, what if she just did, what if the character was able to make this choice? And she would write some sort of paragraph saying as to why they couldn't make that choice. So she would condition it. So she would be I know you're thinking that they actually have this other option here, but no. they don't. And I liked that because she was like, there are no loopholes here, right? And so it was the same when she wrote that when Roz was like, I've been a royal bitch. And I just like,
I know. I loved that. That was great. That was a great line. And I did like, honestly, I loved the like subplot of Frances and George because literally, I think it was such a good, I would say like foretelling of Anthony and Roslyn, because they had love, then they had a fight, and the fight lasted years. And then they just had never been in the same room. And Anthony brings him home. He's like, he just wants to apologize to her, but she never lets him, she's never like in the same room as him, so he can't apologize. And then they get in the same room and they come out and they're like, we love each other, we're getting married.
Yeah, I know. It was very sweet. And it was like, it was such a great happily ever after because George's real son. And anyhow.
Yeah. But I mean, all they needed was a conversation.
Yeah.
And all Anthony and Roslyn needed was to sit down and have a damn conversation.
Well,
with an open-minded conversation,
because Anthony said all the right things so often. Like, he really did.
Yeah.
He said the right things every time. And he explained everything. He never held anything back. And she just wouldn't listen. And even like when they were dancing and he says like, what if I could give you my heart? And she just literally is like, I would chop it in pieces before I even gave it back to you. Like,
I know.
Oh my God,
what
you are a royal bitch. I was so mad at her.
Yeah.
Because by then I'm on Anthony's side. Anybody who shows development, right? And I think this is the problem, right?
Well, and he kept trying to find different ways. And she literally was like throwing them back at him. She's like, nope. And
like, okay, see, that's the thing. Is like Anthony's arc is like shitty and then up, you know, like he goes up, he grows, he is communicative. And her arc is like, I am a badass and I am a strong, independent woman and I have to do things for myself. And now I'm angry and, you know, it was like, I just was so bummed for her because she starts out so strong. And
she does.
And like when Anthony says those terrible things to her in the conservatory, I hated those. I was like, I hate this man. I hate this man so much.
Skeezy level was like 100. I was like reading it and I was like, cringe.
I know.
Cringe.
I hated it. But then she had great responses to his things.
She did. Because she just was like, no. And then even she like let him kiss him. And then she like came out. She's like, why would I go to the room? Like, what the hell are you on? Absolutely not. And then when James kisses her, she's like, what is with the two of you? Knock this off.
Yeah. That was so great. And then like, when it came to matters of the actual heart, like she fell apart. And I mean, maybe it's because she was like raised in seclusion, but I just don't, I don't think we can actually like point at a moment in her history because she just like took her friend's heartbreak like way too far. You know what I mean? Even like not listening to the friend when the friend started telling her things, you know, she just like had an absolute tantrum. And that's not my favorite thing to see for a character, male or female.
Mm-hmm. No.
Also, what's up with the title? Tender Rebel? Who does that refer to?
Yeah, I saw your comment like, what the fuck with the title? And I'm like, you're right. It had literally nothing to do with this book.
Yeah, I was just like, all of a sudden when I finished the book, I thought, okay, like what does it mean? Like Tender Rebel. Who's the rebel here?
I don't think either of them are very rebellious.
Yeah. I mean, they're rebelling against their hearts, maybe.
I know. I don't even think they're rebelling against their hearts. I think Roslyn full on was just ignoring it.
Oh, God, right?
Like, she just was like, I'm going to be mad and I want to stay mad.
Seriously. God, it was so frustrating. I just wanted to smash her against something. I was so angry at her. But okay. So, if anybody has any thoughts about why it's called Tender Rebel or what, let us know because I just didn't see much of a connection here. But like later, I think 2 books later is James's book. And I will say I was totally wrapped up in James's story.
That's very true. I was very intrigued and I was like, oh my goodness. And they give you that little tidbit at the end. I was like, I kind of need to read this now.
Yeah, so in that scene with the doxy, James and they also encounter these 2 Scottish guys and almost get in a fight with them thinking that it's Gordy, but then it turns out that one of them is a woman. So they like go into the alley to have a talk and then they escape. And so later, when he's boarding his ship, he finds out that they've taken on 2 new crew members, like a man and his brother, and it's a Scottish guy. And he does this description, and James knows that it's the woman is now going to be his cabin boy. And I was just like, oh my God, I have to read that book.
I like stories like that. That's always a fun one where it's like a woman pretending to be the man, but the man knows she's pretending. Like, that's always really good.
Yeah. And that's the book that Learning the Tropes used the cover as inspiration for their logo. So it's that typical clinch cover with the rope and anyhow, it's a Fabio one, I believe. So it's great. Anyhow, I imagine that I will be reading that book not too far in the future.
That's okay. I really want to read Derek Mallory's book because the heroine is named Kelsey Langton.
Ooh.
Which is only funny because, guys, okay, I've never had a book where the main character where the heroine was named Kelsey. I've never even had Kelsey be in any of these books, number 1. Number 2, if anyone doesn't know this, you maybe not unless you have seen me on Instagram, my maiden name is Langsdale.
Yeah.
Which is not a very common name, so then to have a Kelsey Langton as the main character, I was like, it's so close. It's so close to me.
I know. We should have read that one. What were we thinking? But I was thinking about this, though, because, right, this book is, Johanna Lindsey is kind of, a foundation of historical romance as we know it today. And I was like, are there other books that we know of with this trope, the misunderstandings trope maybe, but also the I'm not going to open up my heart to a rake. I'm going to I'll allow myself to marry the rake. I've definitely read this book before.
Oh, yes.
And someone on Instagram mentioned A Week to be Wicked by Tessa Dare from Spindle Cove.
Yeah, I just read that one.
So
I literally just read it, guys.
I was thinking you might have because you told me you took a Spindle Cove dive.
I did.
But I was wondering, how do you feel that one differs or benefits from this kind of a foundation?
I think that this really does benefit from the foundation because essentially you have that one was a little bit A Week to be Wicked is a little bit different because essentially they're kind of it's a sham engagement and then he's a rake and he only agrees to it because she eventually just is like, well, I'm going to do this with or without you. So, and he's like, I can't not protect her, she's my cousin's wife's best friend and he controls all my money right now.
Ooh.
Or not best friend, but really good friend. And so he does set off with her just to kind of be protection and hopefully change her mind. But you have this flip where then they do end up marrying and he's that rake who then once he decides he's going to marry her, is all set on that path and is very happy with that path. And I think that this is such a good foundation. And I can't remember specific titles, but I've read something very similar of the rake, who decides to marry the virtuous woman because he really wants her and she's going to throw herself at someone else to marry and he can't allow that to happen. And this I think is really good because it kind of gave you that rake playfulness, but you also got the strong heroine, at least at the beginning. And so I think that in the more modern retellings of a similar story, the rake isn't quite so forceful in his pursuit at the beginning. He's very clear in his pursuit at the beginning, but with less cringeworthy language.
Yeah.
I would say.
And I feel like I can't, I read A Week to be Wicked a long time ago. I don't remember it. And I know I've read others where it is they marry and then the woman just blocks her heart because she's like, I know that this man cannot be faithful to me and that's okay. I've made that bargain, but I'm here now. And I just feel like the authors who have taken this trope since have been able to do it without, the woman just being angry or without a misunderstanding. They've been able to do it in so many other ways. And I think those resonate more with me. But yeah, I wish I could remember some of them. I'm going to have to think about it and maybe we'll talk about it in an upcoming episode.
For me also too, I feel like the misunderstandings in this book isn't necessarily a misunderstanding at all because it's not a misunderstanding where you just need to where you need to sit down and actually deep dive into the conversation because that's a lot of the misunderstandings I think I've read. It's more misunderstandings where it could be solved with a conversation, but there's a lot of outside factors. This was she flat out just refused to listen to him.
She refused to believe it. She absolutely refused to believe the truth, which is just so stupid.
Yeah. And the only reason she didn't want to believe in the truth, which I thought was a little shaky, was the fact that she was like, he kept saying all these nice things, and now I've decided to believe them, even though I've been essentially trying to push him at other women this whole time. And now that I'm finally starting to believe him, I'm now just going to not believe him. And I'm just like, I get it, but really? And after he continuously tries to talk to you about it, you just shut him out and then do it again over other things now? Like, it just, ugh.
All right, so let's rate this hero and heroine. What do you think about Anthony? I feel like Anthony's going to be easier for us, so let's start with him.
He's a 5.
Yeah.
He was going to be a 4, and then we were kind of going through it, and then I remembered, he kind of did step up at the end, and he was better. Very cringeworthy at the beginning, but he stepped up. So I'm going to give him a 5.
I was going to give Anthony, for the exact same reasons as you, a 6, because I felt like he was a 5. I felt like he sucked at the beginning, but he had enough of an arc where I actually liked him at the end. And so it was less of I could take him or leave him, but I was like, okay, you've won me over that I would take you. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I gave him a 6.
Yeah, I really, really disliked him at the beginning. And then I came to be fine with him at the end.
Yes.
So that's why he's a 5. Because
how do you feel about the nickname Tony?
Oh, I hate
in
it.
This time period.
It just no.
It didn't feel right to me.
It didn't feel right to me.
I tried to Google it to look it up just to see if I was wrong, because a lot of the time, things like this, it's just, if you haven't seen it after reading a bunch of these novels, but I really was just like, Maria, Tony, Maria, Tony. And I just had this I was like Latin or Italian guy named Tony, it just, I couldn't get it.
For him to be a lord and in this really high family, Tony just seemed too common man, I think.
Yeah, it also just didn't fit. I love Anthony. I mean, we've got Anthony Bridgerton. It just feels right. So anyhow, sorry, a bit of a diversion. I wanted to make sure we talked about Tony. That's why I didn't use Tony in much of the synopsis, because he just felt more like an Anthony to me.
I would agree. I really didn't like when it was like, call me Tony. And I'm like, ew, why?
So, okay. Now the hard part. Our heroine.
Yeah, she's going to be a 4.
Yeah, I wanted to give her a 5, but I just can't, because if we say a 5 as I could take her or leave her, I can't. I want to leave her. She regressed to me, and I also left the book feeling like this was going to happen again. I didn't feel very secure in their relationship, because it kind of all wrapped up very quickly at the end. And I felt like she didn't actually grow much. And that's a shame, because again, like we said at the beginning, the way she started off at the beginning, she was a 7 for me, you go girl. And she could have grown from there if some other plot line had taken the lead, perhaps.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would leave her. She is not a heroine that I enjoyed, and she made the book not very enjoyable for me.
Agreed.
So, do you have a favorite quote from this book?
Let's find out, because that royal bitch one is really fucking good.
Yeah. So it's funny because my favorite quote is one that we already said. So I was going to share it again because I just actually quite loved it. It was the quote from the scene where Roslynn decides to have sex with Anthony. So I'm going to read it again because it says, quote, "He was a man, victorious, rejoicing, and she didn't care. She was smiling herself, but inwardly, because if he had won, so had she, defeating her own common sense to have what she had wanted all along, to make love with this man, to have him initiate her and be her first lover, because with him, she knew it would be beautiful." And that is awesome. That is really awesome and empowering and great and feminist. And I was just like, yeah, this woman wants to have sex with this man because she knows it's going to be good and she's doing something for herself. So yeah. And I loved the way it was written. It was he can have it, but I know I have power in this moment because I know this is what I wanted.
Yeah. So I have found a different one aside from the royal bitch, which is just fabulous. So this is it's a thought that James Malory had in regards to, so this is after the scene where he like kisses Roz and then, you know, because he could be attracted to her and then she's like, screw both of you, and then leaves. And he's kind of thinking to himself like how he could have pursued her, but she clearly was like favoring Anthony, so he'd leave it. Anyway, so he said, so there was nothing to do for it but to take himself off when he would rather not. Hell and fire and a bloody pox on love at first sight.
Ah, I know. I loved that too, actually. I almost put it into the summary, but, you know, some just don't make the cut when you're going through. So good.
Nope. But yeah, that was a good one because I thought it was funny.
All right, so our steaminess rating and our encounter counter. We had 3 encounters. We technically had 2 others, but they were fade to black. So like there was no, it just said like, and after they made love or something. So I feel like, again, it's anything below the belt. And if no below the belt is described, it doesn't count as an encounter for our counter.
Fair.
Steaminess rating. So I felt like the first one was pretty steamy, and then the other 2 were like angry sex that were a little bit awkward. No, I guess the second one wasn't. The second one was their wedding night, so that was fun and fine. The third one,
and then it kind of became angry sex. I mean, like I thought they were fairly steamy scenes.
Yeah, I think this is a cup of tea.
Yeah, I'd say it was a cup of tea on that rating.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
I wasn't necessarily like, especially afterwards, like with the angry sex. I think even by the wedding night, I was already kind of annoyed with Roslynn.
Yeah.
So like, I didn't really it didn't read as well because I was just like, ugh, I just like both of you.
Yeah, it definitely, like, they definitely had a lot of chemistry, and it was just frustrating as a reader, I think, because we were like, just stop being so stupid. Like, come on.
I mean, I think some of the kisses and even the cringeworthy moments, I think those were a lot hotter than like kind of how it ended up. Like,
True. Okay, so this one's a little bit tough this time, I think, but our feminist recap. So I just shared a quote, which is very feminist and empowering sexually, right?
Yeah.
This book is like very sexually empowering. It actually is like the beginning of this book with her like standing up to this kind of jerk and pushy man. Like that's fabulous. Like it shows a really strong woman. But I feel like on the flip side, the trope of the woman who just won't listen and the woman who like is absolutely irrational, which is how I feel Roslynn was for the second half of the book, is not supportive.
No, I don't like that one at all either. I think I'm kind of hard. I don't know, because I think there were areas where it could have been very like offender. But then it did kind of bounce back. But like you said, I don't think the portrayal of her as like the royal bitch after she got married and becomes like,
I don't think that
harpy wife.
That is
that's
a great thing
positive
for young girls to read about right now. But again, this was written 32 years ago. So there's just, it's a different time. It's a different time period for books. So like, I don't look at this book now and feel like this book is an offender, but I don't think this book is a strong supporter. I think it falls somewhere in the neutral category because of like, it is supportive about this, but it isn't so current in other things. So I feel like you can look at it as a product of its time, but also feel like there are some great things to take away from it. But then again, like I said, there's some that I don't particularly enjoy. So I find it to be that it ends up balancing out to be like neutral.
I would say that too. I would say I felt fairly neutral about it because it did have good balancing.
Yeah.
At least at the beginning.
Good. Yeah. All right. So it is time for our final book rating. How did we feel about this book? Do you want me to go first?
Yeah.
So I'm going to rate this book a 5. I could take this book or leave it. It's true. I really wanted to give it higher. You know, we're here to celebrate Johanna Lindsey today. And I still think that's what we're doing. Just because it didn't resonate with us doesn't mean that it's not really great that we're talking about the awesome works that she has made, you know? And I am 100% also like I said earlier, like I need to read Gentle Rogue and I'll probably read others. And I think it's also, again, like we said, neither of us had ever read Johanna Lindsey before. So like shame on us.
Yeah. And I think that I also am at a 5, which is why I laughed when you said that.
Yeah.
Because I was like, oh, thank God. That was what I was going to say. And yeah, I'm at a 5. I really did like her writing.
Yeah.
And I really
agree.
did like her scenes, and I really did like her characterizations. Like, I did feel like I knew the characters. I mean, some of the plot was a bit erratic, but that's fine. Like, I thought overall she did a really, and I like how she didn't like string it out for no reason. I like that it was like she woke up kidnapped. Yeah. And I was like, I kind of appreciated that, because I was like, oh, thank God we don't have to read like about another week of like shopping and excursions and nothing happening. Like, she just got kidnapped. And so I did like that. And I'm definitely interested in some of her other books. And that's fine. There were tropes in this that you and I don't like, which is fine. Everyone has their jam. And you and I have both read books that, you know, the one loved and the other didn't. And it's just a matter of reading preference. But I think overall her writing is very good. And I liked and I liked the depth of her characters as well as her supporting characters. So I'll definitely be picking up another one for sure.
I agree. I agree completely. I was like, I really wanted to like this more, but the tropes just pushed it down for me. They just aren't my jam. And yet, like I said, gotta read Gentle Rogue. Must read it. Must know.
I will say, so I think you and I were intrigued by this because we really like the reforming the rake. Like, I love that trope. I love the womanizing man who meets the girl of his dreams and is suddenly like, yeah, I don't need to do that anymore.
Yeah, no, I love it too. I do too. I also like the reformed woman rake trope, but I gotta stop talking about the rakess. Sorry. Oh, so what a fun discussion, though. I think it was really interesting, and I'm really glad that we got to read one of Johanna Lindsey's books.
Yes, I am too. So, Zoe, now that we've read Johanna Lindsey, what are we reading next time?
Well, this one's a little different. So next week, we are going to be taking a much needed break for 1 week, but we aren't going to leave you guys with nothing. What we are going to be doing is we're going to be remastering one of our less listened to episodes that we think deserves a little bit more love, but maybe I didn't have the editing skills that I have now. So the sound quality wasn't quite as good. And again, it is one of our older episodes. We are going to be re-airing and giving you a second chance at love at our episode number 2, which is the second book in the Penny Royal Green series, Like No Other Lover, which is a fabulous book.
Oh, so good.
I love that book. So we hope you all join us next week as you listen to a much better sounding version of Like No Other Lover.
And may all your ever afters end happily.
Tea and Strumpets is part of the Frolic Podcast Network. Find more podcasts you'll love at frolic.media/podcasts.
Are we saying
Gordy?
I was going to say Geordie or Gordy.
Geordie could be. What do we want to say? Geordie or Gordy? I think. What do you think the Scottish would say? That's not Scottish. Oh,
yeah.
God.
Close.
Geordie, Geordie. I don't know if they'd say Geordie, so maybe Gordy.
We'll go with Gordy. And if we're pronouncing it wrong, someone will correct us.
If your heart's mine, then it's mine to do with as I choose, and I'd be choosing to cut it into wee pieces afore I give it back.
Oh, my Lord.
I'm so mad at her right now.
Oh, my God. It just was like, bang, head against wall. Okay. Then we have a brief.
It's a husband I'm needing, not a love, and you dinna qualify. More's the. It's a husband I'm needing, not a love, and you dinna qualify. More's the pity.
That sounds so bad. That's not Scottish at all.
It's not Scottish at all. Oh my God. Okay.